Hey, it's Armin with Attract. At Attract Advisors, we offer accounting advisory, tax advisory, as well as financial management services. We're lucky enough to work with very many hardworking, talented entrepreneurs across many different industries. Many of these individuals are world-class in their sphere and have great stories to tell. This is our way of highlighting their accomplishments and their insights, and we hope you enjoy these conversations.
Everybody to the next episode of Kickin Assets. Today we're joined by someone who I really have looked up to for quite some time. He's great on social media. Proud to introduce my friend Coach Carey Ourso. Coach, thanks so much for being here. What's new?
Thanks so much for having me.
So what I love about Coach is I followed your content way before I knew who you were, and then our mutual friend Eric Richard connected us, and you and I got a chance to meet. We went to lunch a couple months ago. You gave me your book, which is amazing. We're going to dive into this today. And where I want to start, though, is really early on for you. And, kind of go through a little bit about your childhood and then your early career. And what I love most about what you've become and what the lessons that you've learned have morphed you into is your coaching experience. So, quick and dirty, let's hear it.
Yes, so I'm from a middle-upper-class family, Gramercy, Louisiana, small town. My dad was a plant manager. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we grew up playing ball, baseball in particular, and eventually went into coaching.
And so what I read in the book was that your team that you had taken over, I don't think had a historical record of a ton of success. Can you kind of talk about some of the lessons you learned in coaching, and particularly in dealing with young men, that really transcended into what you've become now as a very successful business owner and coach?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is learning how to overcome adversity. Everybody has adversity, from the high school kids that are playing ball, and ball is the biggest thing in their life at the time, and learning how to win, but also learning how to lose, and learning how to pick yourself back up after a loss and get back on the same path. And it's the same way in business, and it's the same way in life, and particularly being able to pick yourself up the mat in life. Like, things happen to us, and everybody goes through them. Not everybody speaks about them, so you don't know, but really, everybody's going through some tragedies in their life, and their own tragedy is theirs, and it's important to them as your tragedy is to you. And the bottom line is it's not about the tragedy. It has to be about the blessings that come out of the tragedies. What do you learn in the loss of the ball game? What do you learn in the loss of business? What do you learn in the loss in life? To be able to make yourself bigger and better on the backside of that.
Amen. And what I love about sports, and I alluded to this kind of in the intro with you being a coach. I'm a former athlete, and I'm also a coach. I coach a 4 and 5 year old Healing Place Church soccer team. Proud, but when you were raising up these young men and teaching them baseball, I know that baseball has always been a part of South Louisiana culture. But I take it that there was a time that you had to recruit or you had to develop young talent. What was it that set you guys apart to really achieve that level of success where you guys won state, right?
Yeah, we won a couple, yeah.
Yeah, a few. So what was it in so far as, what was the secret sauce between your teams that made them champions year after year?
Yeah, I think, so in high school, you don't really get to recruit anybody. You kind of, you deal with the hand that you're dealt. And, fortunately, I was dealt some pretty good hands, but those hands had never won championships before. And so, we had to kind of figure out, what was the difference? What would make the difference? And it really was about everybody understanding their role within the team and accepting that role and taking that role and doing the best you could do within it. Like, the thing was really taking the average player and making him good, the good player and making him great, and making the great player believe he could play that way most of the time, right? And the guys that needed coaching up, coach them up. But the guys that didn't basically just stand back and clap your hands when they hit the home runs, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to mess anybody up. We don't want to take a 400 hitter and make him a 300 hitter.
Right.
So yeah, it was mostly buying in. It was really outside of physically what we were going to do and the X's and O's of the game. It was getting the team to buy into a philosophy that everybody was important, and if everybody did their little part, we could be successful.
And it's something that I saw even a few months ago. At this point, I saw Brian Kelly speak, and he made a comment that I think resonates with all coaches and even resonates with all business owners. And what he said was, what separates the good teams from the great is that on great teams, your best players are also the best leaders. And in my experience, coming up through college football, Southeastern, and even before that, you always had high performers who probably weren't the best teammates or who, slacked off in practice, but their talent could get them through the game. What was it like on your state championship teams from a leadership perspective, like with some of your players?
Yeah, I think the key with leaders is allowing leaders to lead. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have guys that are capable of being leaders, but you micromanage that process. And they don't ever actually lead. They're leaders, but they don't get the opportunity to lead. And I think it's allowing people to lead, not only in baseball, in business. It's super important. We have a saying in our business, hire world-class who's and let the who's figure out the hows. Mm-hmm. That simply means bring on good people, but let those good people use their talents. Don't micromanage them. And I think it's the same thing in athletics. There are lots of teams that have leaders, but the coaches kind of sometimes take the role of the leader and they never hear from the players. Mm-hmm. We just recently had a mid-year meeting with our business. We had 18 of our leadership people in the meeting. And one of the things we did was said, we got to come up with some policies and we got to come up with some procedures. We've got our own thoughts, but we want you guys to tell us what the policy should be based on this criteria. And it was amazing how they were willing to hold themselves accountable without us saying what it was going to be. And that buy-in becomes easy because they set the policy. And ironically, they said it almost exactly like we would have said it.
Yeah. And we call that co-authoring, right? Like, it's so easy to hold your team accountable to something that they said that they were going to do, not that you told them they needed to do. And to your point about letting leaders lead, I think in athletics and also in business, you said it, micromanaging, a lot of it I think is ego related. John wants to have basically take all the credit for things going, good or bad. You don't really strike me as someone who takes or needs a lot of credit. Is that right? And was that how it was when you were a coach?
I always said, when I was in the coaching, there wasn't a lot of tournament ball, but they were breaking into people doing private lessons, and some coaches were against that. Like, this guy's trying to teach my player how to hit differently. He's trying to teach. And I always, thought like if he can hit, if he learns to hit somewhere and he hits better in the games that he's on my team, who gets the credit anyway? Like, I get the win. Like, who cares who did the process, right? Like, that's not important. It's really a result-oriented thing. And when you're able to step back and just kind of admit, like, hey, I'm leading this deal, but this is really not about me. Like, my business today is less about me than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. But the success is higher than it's ever been. And, like, I'm okay with that. Like, I pass the credit on all the time to my president and vice president. And they pass the credit on to our directors. And our directors pass it on to operators. That's how it should be. Mm-hmm. Grabbing all the credit and all the glory doesn't help you build the business.
And I think that humility that you have is what great leaders have, right? And I think that it imparts on your team a sense of humility because they see it at the top. Just like you said, everybody who gets, has direct reports, basically the credit flows, in that direction. So that's really amazing. I wanted to ask you kind of about your transition outside of coaching, because obviously in the book, you talk about how what you've become in now has kind of morphed into something bigger than you ever dreamed of. But what was it, maybe there's some listeners out there who are coaches or who are in jobs that, they feel like they could be getting more out of. What was it for you that really prompted you to kind of step out in faith back then, even to, start doing things like this on the side, and then it grew into what it is today?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty easy. I was broke. So I was, at the time, I was a broke coach. My family was getting bigger. So I had to find something different, but I also needed the income from my coaching while I started to grow the business. And I think that's a real important thing that's in the book is use your job to fund your business until your business can fund your freedom. And lots of times, we get stuck doing things because it's comfortable and that's what we're used to doing. And I love coaching. And I would still be in coaching today if I can make in coaching what I make in business, right? But in essence, I'm just coaching a different team. Like they're wearing different jerseys. But we have the same team. We're looking for great players. And the more great players that we can put on our team, the more great things we can do.
It's so good. And soon after starting the franchise, I know is where, kind of on the personal side, you faced, what you called earlier as adversity. I think adversity is an understatement. When you read the book, you guys will understand. But can you kind of talk about how the lessons that you had learned, even leading up to facing that first bout of adversity, and maybe, give us an overview of what that adversity looked like for you and where you were at in your life when it started hitting?
Yeah, so it basically started 10 years ago. I lost my first wife suddenly 10 years ago. Met someone else. A couple years later, remarried, had a terrible divorce. Another year or so go by, I met a beautiful lady and ended up marrying her, which was the biggest blessing ever in my life. And then lost her 10 months after we were married to cancer. 3 months before that, I had a brain bleed and spent 10 days in ICU. So there was a lot, right? A lot in the 10 years. And I say in the book, like, I survived. I think a couple reasons I survived all this. Like, I really found a church. I found a pastor, a church, and a therapist. It's one of the chapters in the book, right? Along this journey right after the divorce. And I got a different relationship with God. I released a lot of things, just kind of said, I can't control all this. Like, you're going to have to take control of it. Just tell me the direction you want me to go. So my faith grew. Linda, which was my wife that had recently passed away, she said to me about 3 or 4 days before she passed, she said, nothing grows on the mountaintop. Everything grows in the valley where all the nutrients and water are. And I really didn't know why she was telling me that at the time, but I think she was telling me that because she knew I was fixing to be in the valley again. But that applies to everything in life, right? But mostly, and I refer to this in the book also, like, I don't know how to do anything else but get up off the mat.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from coaching. Like, you coach and you win some and you lose some, but you got to get up and go to practice the next day. And you got to get up and play the next game with the risk of losing again. People say to me all the time, like, you really thinking about getting married again? I'm like, well, I'm not at the marriage point. I'm dating a really cool woman right now. But, like, I have faith in humanity. Like, I believe there are more good people in the world than bad people. The reason we see the bad so much is that's what the news covers, and the bad people scream and yell louder than the good people. I'm here today, like, to say, like, we're some of the good guys,
right?
And we need to voice our opinion. It's like we just developed a shirt for the book. It's got Victory Shadow across the top, and on the back it has Pray Big Prayers. Because, again, I'm referring to the book, but, in it I talk about, we pray big prayers because we believe we have a big God who's capable of big things. And I'm not going to insult that big God with little bitty prayers.
Amen.
I'm going to pray big prayers so that along the way, we can get some small things going and look at those as blessings versus pray the small prayers and have nothing happening. So it was a transition from, how I survived in the coaching industry of getting off the mat, and then where my faith had brought me.
Mm-hmm. And praying big prayers alongside of that is, the Bible is a book of action, right? Telling us to take action, and it seems obviously that's what you've been able to do. And so, kind of walk us through the early evolution days of starting off the franchise as a side hustle, and then when it became full time, and then continued growth. But as you noted earlier, your massive growth started when you step back. Yeah. And so take me through those early days, though, of what the evolution of the franchise looked like.
Yeah, so the plan all along was not something to just supplement my coaching income. The plan always was to be able to exit the coaching scene and grow the business. Mm-hmm. But I used the coaching business at the end to be able to supplement me until I can grow it. So the initial plan was, once I can make the same amount of money in my janneking business as I was making in coaching, I would quit. It sounds kind of crazy because that means I doubled my income, and then now I'm going to give one of them back again and go back to being broke, right? Mm. But I saw a bigger picture. So crazy enough, it took about 6 months, and I was making as much in janneking as I was making in coaching. I'd been coaching for 15 years. Mm. And so just like I promised myself, I quit because I was teaching during the day, coaching in the afternoons, and cleaning buildings at night. Like, how long can you sustain that, right? Mm-hmm. So I gave it up and went straight back into the business. And now I took a 50% cut in pay. I was back to making what I was making coaching, but I had the potential now to grow. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think it all began. My dad was a big influence. He was an entrepreneur. He also run a company with about 500 employees. And a couple of things that he told me right away when, because he invested in this thing, right? It was $16,500. I didn't have the $500. So I had to convince him to invest in it. He did. And what he said to me was a couple of things. Number one, he said, this business, its biggest expense is labor. If you manage the labor, you can make a lot of money. If you fail to manage the labor, you will go broke in this business. That was lesson number one. Lesson number two, which was a little bit later down the line, but not very far, he said, you have to put people in place before maybe you're ready to put them in place. And I was kind of confused about what that meant. Like, how do you know you're ready if you're not ready? But it really, even today, it's kind of a feeling that I get. Like, okay, we're almost at that point. Like, if we had this extra person, yeah, it's a little bit early. But you know what? I found the person. Let's put them on the bus and figure out where they're going to play later. Mm-hmm. And so we never pass up good people. So along the way, we used that as a goal, and we continually did that. And then it was about really finding the key person. There's something that says that two people can do 10 times as much as one person can do. And there's some biblical truth to that. And it doesn't say two people can do twice as much as one person. It says 10 times as much. And the Bible talks about, hey, if somebody tries to take you out as one person, you got a brother mm-hmm. on the side. Or if you're sick, you got someone else. Well, thank God I took that advice because, I laid in a hospital bed in 10 days, starting in May of 2024. Mm-hmm. It took me a month to recover from all that. After I was out of the hospital, my wife was diagnosed with cancer less than a month later. I didn't see the business again until January of 25. But I had people in place. Mm-hmm. I had those people. And the business continued to grow. I continued to make more money not being there, which is a really cool thing. It wasn't cool while I wasn't there, but it was really a cool thing that happened. So the key is putting the right people in place. And because I brought my youngest son on board, we went from 500,000 to 5 million in 5 years. That's mm-hmm. 10 times, right? Like, that's not made up numbers. That really happened. And then he exits the scene to do his own thing, and my daughter jumps in and jumps the business another couple $1 million. Like, we're on a trajectory to do really good things. Mm-hmm. So it's about people. People drive business. Business don't drive people.
That's it. And so, getting a little technical here with the labor, like what were some of the things that you kind of learned early on insofar as managing that labor that might set you apart from someone who's less successful?
Yes, so Janet King projects labor is 40%. And my daddy right off the bat said, we need to do time studies. And I was a coach, like, what's a time study, right? Kind of like the same thing I said 3 or 4 years ago about when my new the business development came in and said, we need a CRM. And I went, what's a CRM?
Right.
Right? It was kind of that ignorant of a question, like, what's a time study? And we still do those today. Like, he taught me, you're going to have to go in and clean these buildings to know exactly how long they take. It's projected at this, but if we can save 2%, 3% of that 40, that's big money. Well, you don't see that as big money then, but when you start running $5 or $6 million and you can save 7% on labor, it's huge dollars. So it started with time studies, and we still do some of them today, not as much because we're more educated on the process and how long things take. But we're able to save 5 to 7% on labor now.
And it's data driven, right? I mean, the time study gives you the data. You have a per job budget. That's a lot of the things that we do for some of our clients, on the construction side especially. But having labor efficiencies is key in any business, and that's obviously why I wanted to dig in.
Yeah, you've gotta find where you can save money. But the key is to not try to decrease the labor so much that you affect the product that you're putting out. There's that fine line. Some people go across it and then you lose business because of it. There's a fine line. We've kind of figured out about where that is. And our time studies now consist of people clock in and they clock out, and we get to see how long they're spending based on how long we project and what does the customer say about the cleans that we're doing. So if we have a person that's projected to stay 4 hours and they're staying 3, and the client is happy, and our inspections say the building's clean, guess what happens when that person leaves to go somewhere else? We pay 3 hours, not 4, because we were overpaying it by an hour. So we're constantly monitoring that as a way to save money. And then once you get to a point where there's not any more money to save labor-wise, you've got to find money in other areas, savings in other areas. So then we started looking at chemicals and equipment. Well, we're doing the most efficient things with the chemicals. Can we get that projection of 3% down? Well, 1% is a lot of money when you run $5 to $6 million. Well, we got chemicals from 3% to 1% with different systems, different chemicals. We're able to get the equipment down. So we found savings in a lot of places, and those savings don't go to my bottom line all the time. What they do is they allow me to put more key people in place in order to continue to grow the business. That's also a big part of it.
And what really interests me is that period of time where you went from $500K to $5 million in 5 years, you said?
Yes.
And so obviously it starts with the right people. You were able to reinvest more into your company. I'm curious to know, because you've got some really big accounts, what does your sales and marketing piece look like? We talked a little about your CRM, but spending the money and the time and the effort to go out there and make these types of connections, I assume was one of the driving factors of that exponential growth.
Yeah, so Janet King also does sales for us. It's part of their program that they sell business and they sell it to the franchise owners. So lots of our growth took place that way. But we also have to have people in place to be able to sustain that growth. We have to have people in place to be able to take that business. So operational, that's where we added a lot of people. Today, our operational people have learned how to do sales. And we now have a salesperson, a business development person on staff that really knows how to sell. So we fund all of those people. And I don't do a lot of reading. I wrote a book. Don't do a lot of reading, but recently I've read some really cool books. And the most recent one I've read, and we're fixing to implement this, is Go for No. And it talks about just getting through all the no's to get to the yeses. Like sometimes hard no's, you're not gonna get to say yes. And easy yeses will come to anybody that approaches them. It's the gray area ones, right? So and you don't know this, and this just happened last night. We lost $1 million of business last night. $1 million contract a year, decided to go to another company that's bid it at 50% under. Do I think they can perform at 50%? I don't, but I'm not concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is overnight I had to put a strategy together that I'm going to go to my team with this afternoon and tell them how we're going to get that $1 million back in 6 months. But the strategy is bigger than that. It's how we're going to get $2 million back in 6 months, so we're $1 million more. That's not just talk. I've got the numbers, and I'm going to give it to my executive team today, and we're going to present it to our team next week. And we're going to go out. It's very simple. We're going to go out and find 5,000 no's in 6 months, because I know them no's run into yeses. And we're going to quit focusing on yeses, because sometimes you get depressed with no's. We're going to get excited about how many no's we can get through in 6 months. And if we get through 5,000, we're going to have beat the $1 million contract. And you don't always replace a great player with one player. Like, I've had players that I go, there's no way we can replace that guy. You replace him with 3 or 4 others that can piece it together to become that one great guy. Because there are a lot of average players out there. There's some good ones. There are very few great ones. But how do the great teams always stay on top when they lose great players? Yeah, they do replace some of the great ones sometimes, but they have a system that allows everybody else to pick up the pieces along the way. And we're fixing to replace a big, big account with maybe a lot of other small ones to make up one big one. We're getting through 5,000 no's. And listen, I'm excited about that. Like, people probably would go, how you doing this podcast? Why would you even bring that up? Like, it's $1 million contract a year. Like, what other choice do we have? Like, we got to get off the mat again.
That's
right?
it. Oh,
like,
it's so good.
When you survive a spouse's death and you survive a brain bleed, getting off the mat for a business purpose is easy.
It's so good that you say that, because in my life in particular, you know, there was a few things that went wrong for me around my college career. One of them was just this terrible knee injury that ended my playing career, and I had 4 surgeries. I was on crutches for 9 months. But I felt like if I could come back from that, then the CPA exam didn't look so hard. And then, you know, starting a business didn't look so hard. And then, you know, starting a real estate company didn't look so hard. And so, you know, we just stack these wins and, you know, continue to honor those wins, not to basically rest on them, right? We're not resting, but we're reminding ourselves that, you know, we can get it done, right? And I feel like where you're at, being able to, you know, put the right team around you, develop talent from within. Talk to me about that development, because you're replacing these people. I assume you've probably at this point have some pretty bang up training programs, or maybe trainers on staff. Like, how do you, when you find a great new team member, how do you orient them and get them into the mix to where they could perform at their highest capability? Yeah,
you know, so going back to speaking about the world-class who's, right? The first thing we had to do is identify who they are. And we did that. It's, you know, it's people that look like us, walk like us, talk like us, act like us, dream like us. But what we also found when I wrote the book, I found that I had to identify who they weren't. Because in today's world, people are great at interviewing. Like, they know how to dress, they know what to say. They can produce a resume on AI. They're very good at that. So you get food, and then you go through some people. And I said to myself, who aren't they? And I looked at who the last 5 that we had brought on board, and what we thought they were, but what they really were, and what characteristics they all have. Every one of them was without a job, and every one of them could start tomorrow. And it didn't work out. And I went, wait a second, a world-class who would have a job? What are we doing? And so now we have a thing like, when we're looking for world-class who's, my people are instructed. The first question is, do you have a job? If they say no, we hang up. And if they say, yes, I have a job, we say, when can you start? If they say tomorrow, we're not interested. Because if they're going to leave their employer with no notice, they'll do the same thing to us. We're not interested in that type of person. Are there some exceptions to the rules? Yes. but I'm the one that gets to determine the exception, right? If they come to me and say, we got this really good guy, and he was a stay-at-home dad because his wife has this really great job, and they have 2 little ones, but he's ready to enter the workforce again, there might be an exception there. But on a basic look at it, that's what we're talking about. So then we get the right person on board. But that's not where it ends, because we have to figure out what their talents are. Mm-hmm. Just like a baseball player. He comes to you with some talent, but we got to draw it out of him. We got to practice them. We got to teach them the find new things that they might not know. And so it's the same thing. We just can't bring a person on and go, come on board, you're a world-class who? Knock it out the park. It doesn't work that way. They've got to practice. We've got to talk through training. They got to learn our business. But once they do that, we relinquish them and say, go do your thing. And I think that's why we've been pretty successful with it.
So good. And so getting to 5 million, the company's running itself. How I found out about you was through, your coaching services now, professional coaching. And can you talk a little bit about the genesis of that and what it's kind of morphed into today?
Yeah, so the way it happened was my barber kept telling me, you got to talk to my brother. You got to talk to your brother. And I said, who's your brother? Like, who's your brother? And he would tell me the name, but he didn't give me a lot. So finally, after my wife passed, I was getting my hair cut again, and he made the same comment. And I said, just set up the meeting with your brother. Like, I'll go meet with him. Really didn't know what he did. I knew he was in some type of marketing type thing. Sat down with him for about an hour and a half. They thought I was coming to talk to them about my Janneking business. And an hour and a half later, I finished telling my story about all the tragedy. It was 1 month after my wife had passed. So it was emotional. It was tear-jerking. And these 4 people are sitting around a room after, like, with their mouths open, just staring at me like this was incredible, right? And the story, in my opinion, the story doesn't have a lot of meaning if it's just about going from 500,000 to 5 million. The story doesn't have as much meaning if it's only about the tragedies. But the combination of the tragedies along with the business success is what makes it unique. And my daughter said to me on the way home from making funeral arrangements for my wife, she goes, Daddy, you gotta do something with this. Like, people need to hear your story. They need to hear how you survived. And not only how you survived, how you're thriving still in this. So it made me think. I went to the meeting with Orange Strategy, and they all were jaw dropped. And I kind of just said, listen, man, I'm fixing to maybe spend a lot of money with you guys, and I need to know, am I a hero or a zero? Like, I got to know if I'm the starting shortstop or I'm the third string who thinks he's a starter. Mm-hmm. And the one girl said, it's funny you bring up baseball because I was a softball player and I do a little coaching now. I don't think you're the third string, and you might be the MVP of the league. And I looked at the other girl, I said, hero or zero? She said, hero for sure. And then I looked at the owner and I said, here's the deal. What y'all need to know is if we're gonna do this, I don't fail. Mm-hmm. So if this don't work, it's gonna be y'all fault. And I signed up. And so we've been on that journey. It's been an incredible journey. It's been growth for me personally. I've got to meet a lot of cool people, like you guys. And it's just been, and the people that we're affecting, the people that have read the book, I don't get a lot of back about, man, it was a great business story from business people. I get, man, this was a great story. Like, you took us on a journey, and you took us along for the ride emotionally, and we learned some business techniques through you. And that makes me feel really good, because initially the book was just intended on being a thing that I had as a speaker, some credibility as a speaker, and it turned into taking its own meaning. And I'm more fired up about the book, what it's doing in the world and people's lives, maybe than I am about anything.
It's so good. And so as we kind of wrap here, I could feel your passion. I mean, I saw your passion on some of the social media posts, again, even before we met. And I'm curious as to maybe some of the problems or the people that, are going through some things right now who could use you, or like, who do you like to appeal to kind of like on the coaching and speaking circuit?
So I'm in the service industry. So that niche is really where we're looking at moving with this in February with the first ticketed event. And the thing that I say to those people is it is a people problem. But ironically, people are the solution.
That's so good. And because I know you've done a lot of coaching or at least consulting even for other Janet King franchises. And so I take it that those were some great experiences for you to basically get social proof that there was a need for coaching service level based companies. What has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, so that's where I started with this, was speaking at Janet King conventions and speaking to the group of people that I know their business. That's ultimately where I'm best at, because I know all the details of that business, mm-hmm. right? But there's other people that are in small businesses, whether it's a grass cutting business and they're still on the lawnmower, they're still on a weed eater, and teaching them how to put 3 or 4 crews out and how to manage that. Or the pressure washer guy that's got 1 unit and he's got to be on it every day, so he's turning business down because he's still trying to manage that 1 unit, or he's actually doing the work. It's for all those kind of people. Whether you're at $100,000 a year or $1 million a year, what I'm trying to show you is how to put pieces in place to continue to grow. Not everybody wants to have a $5 or $6 million business like me, and that's okay. I don't understand it, but it's okay if what you're looking for is something different. But I want to help you get to where you want to get in business, and along that ride, maybe you get something more important. It's like some personal growth along the way and some things that you can apply in your life, or some life lessons that you can apply in your business. That's ultimately the goal. It's a mission of hope, giving hope to business owners that maybe have lost hope, giving hope to individuals who have maybe lost hope in their self or in humanity. It's spreading hope. And I think we're capable of all doing that. And I'm developing a platform just to be able to do it maybe a little bit bigger and help people. And I'm super excited that I don't feel like I need to keep the secrets to myself, that I'm beyond that point in my life. And I have a saying is that I don't have to be right. I just got to be happy.
That's it.
And I try to live by that.
And you bring up something, and I think we've talked about it at lunch, or maybe I read about it in the book, but how for a lot of folks like us, there's a little bit of a fear of putting yourself out there too much, or of, just drawing a lot of haters, or being too forward with how successful you are in business, or how your life has changed from, or good to better to best and things of that nature. What do you say to people who don't feel like we should be putting ourselves out there from like a financial or a success or even a good news position?
Well, I always say this. If the room that you're sitting in thinks that what you're saying comes across as arrogant, you need to change the room you're sitting in.
So good.
Okay? And secondly is that it is our job to spread the good news. Mm-hmm. Whether it's good news about life, good news about business, good news spiritually, it is our job to spread the good news. And look, the fear is anybody gonna follow, right? Because, when I did my brand and book launch, like the fear is we did all these invites, how many people are gonna show up? Like, what if only 10 show up and we think 150 gonna show up? What if we do this ticketed event and we think we're going to put 100 in a room and 10 or 12 show up? Well, I look at it this way. Jesus couldn't find but 12 people to follow him.
That's it.
So if I get half of that on the first ticketed event, we're going to be off to a great start. And if we get more than that, like, we're headed completely in the right direction. So I don't worry about that. I want to spread this news and this strategic part of business to the people that want to listen. And I know that the majority of people are people who have to watch and wait. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they gravitate towards it. there are a small few that will jump right away. We're going to run with them few, and we're going to let the other people watch and wait. And when they're ready, they'll come aboard. And there are going to be some naysayers who will never come aboard. But we can't concern ourselves about those people. So we just keep putting it out there, man. Like, I'm excited about putting it out there. This thing is not about the money that we can make off of it. It's about the message that we can send out. It takes money to fund everything, right? So let's not make a mistake that it's nothing about money, because it takes money to do everything that you're going to do and do it in the right way. But it's about seeing other people become successful. And if we can get other people to have what they want, we ultimately get what we want.
That's so good. And so you talked about the ticketed event. I'm interested to hear more details about that, and I think our listeners would be as well. And then as we wrap up, why don't you let us know how we can get in touch with you, where we can find your book, things of that nature.
Yeah, so my book is online on every major bookstore. Amazon's a great place to find it. Books A Million carries it, but it is online. I do have a couple, 100 copies on hand. So if you know me and you're trying to purchase one that way, we can get it to you that way through the mail. So the ticket event is in the infant stages. Orange Strategy is working on all of that as we speak. We don't have an exact date. We do have an exact month. It is going to be February. And we're excited about it. It's going to be a one-day event. We're going to have it locally. We haven't picked the site yet, but it's going to most likely be the Baton Rouge area, because I want to start in the roots where we are. Once we get all that information, we're going to put it out there. What I recommend is start to follow me on Facebook. It's under Carey Ourso. My brand is Coach Carey G, and you can learn to live the journey with me and come aboard with us. We're excited about it.
That's so great. Well, Coach, it's been an amazing opportunity to really take what I read in the book and bring it to life. You know, I know we've talked before about a potential for you to narrate your own book. I think that's a really awesome thing. I'm looking forward to if that ever comes into fruition, and just looking forward to following your journey. You know, someone who is obviously very passionate, very successful. I always like to learn from people who have done things instead of people who are just theorists for certain types of things. And so just want to honor you and thank you again for joining us here today. I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I appreciate you.
Take care.
Yes, sir.
All right.